My name is Justin Campanola, and I am doing debate 4 regarding the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, and I'm going to explain why that was bad for the overall security of the Middle East. So, just as background, Soleimani was the leader of the Iranian Quds Force, which was the foreign arm, or currently is the foreign arm of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And Soleimani's command directed Iran's overseas operations, definitely on a global scale, but in the Middle East, it tended to focus on Yemen, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon. The Quds Force also supports many non-state actors, including Hezbollah, which is a Lebanese Shia militant group, which actively works to undermine Lebanon as well as Israeli security interests. It also backs Hamas, which is a Palestinian militant group. It backs the Houthi rebels in Yemen, as well as Shia militias in Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. So the first off, one of the main reasons why the assassination was bad for security in the Middle East was that it strengthens Iranian resolve against the United States and its allies. Soleimani was a popular national figure in Iran, with mass protests and multi-city funerals being held, which signified his domestic report. This is according to Nasser Karimi of the Associated Press. And he also argues that um, it Soleimani was a figure of resistance against U.S. pressure, um, and so by assassinating Soleimani, he argues that Iran is strengthened in its resolve against not only the U.S. but the West in general, and as seen previously in both Ukraine as well as several decades ago in the U.S. war in Vietnam, that having a superior military doesn't necessarily mean that one has a lot of power, and having a sizable support for that government and its actions can be a significant force in projecting power towards not only the Middle East, but against the United States as well as its allies, including Saudi Arabia and Israel. And the assassination of Soleimani definitely strengthened that resolve, which works against our own security interests in the Middle East, as well as those of our allies, including Saudi Arabia and Israel. Furthermore, while it's sort of unlikely, it definitely is a possibility that the assassination of Soleimani could reignite that desire for Iran to pursue a nuclear program, because Iran views the US as not necessarily abiding by any of the agreements that it agreed to. So Iran views that it shouldn't necessarily have to abide by its agreements not to pursue a nuclear program, which would be very bad for security in the Middle East if Iran were to get a nuclear weapon, because it not only would pose an existential threat to many countries, including Israel, but it would also likely include Saudi Arabia pursuing a nuclear program as well, which would strengthen the current Middle Eastern Cold War between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Further, one of the most compelling arguments against Soleimani and why his assassination was bad for national security in the Middle East was that it could result in potential asymmetric attacks against key U.S. allies in the region, including Saudi Arabia and Israel, which tend to be two of Iran's sworn enemies. These could be carried out either by the Iranian army itself or through its proxy forces. Again, Iran supports many proxy forces, and Soleimani was the commander of many of these Iranian-backed proxy forces. In an Al Jazeera article, Holly Digress actually notes how uh, this assassination strengthens that likelihood of Iran retaliating against its enemy, and it could retaliate using its militia forces, including in Yemen, Lebanon, Palestine, Iraq, and even Afghanistan, which actually, in the situations of Iraq and Afghanistan, it actually presents a danger to not only the Middle East, but to U.S. troops in the region as well. According to Jerry Merrill of The Hill, he's a defense analyst. He says that Iran basically supported these militias, and Soleimani was the mastermind of that. And so his assassination contributes to a already chaotic situation in Iraq. Um, Not only that, but Russia could get further involved in the Middle East. There's a high degree of competing interest between the U.S. and Russia in the Middle East, and given that Russia supports Iran, they could get further involved in the situations in Syria, in Yemen, which would be drastic for the security of the Middle East as a whole. Um, Additionally, given that Iran has a major rivalry with Saudi Arabia, it could potentially uh, use its military or its proxy forces to support attacks against the Saudi royal family, which would be very bad for the stability and the security of the Middle East. Escalating conflict isn't good for national security in any region, especially in the Middle East, and that is what the United States has done.